just because I want to know all about it. I want to start with the Superman documentary on HBO.
Absolutely. So Superman, the Christopher Reeve story came out within the past few months at least. It looks like, okay, release date was September 21st, 2024. So we're
Uh-huh.
about 2.5 months out, give or take. So this covers Christopher Reeve. It's currently streaming on HBO Max, and it tells his story really just from adulthood and more or less like when he went to Juilliard. So it talks about college years up until him auditioning for Superman. So in the very beginning, it talks about how he has this love for theater and more so Broadway theater. And that's sort of the direction that he thought he was going to be taking and what his parents anticipated for him. And as he's in school at Juilliard, he meets one of his best friends, Robin Williams. And I was not aware that they were such close friends until seeing this documentary, which is pretty great. And you see photos of them during this time. And as you're really getting started and into the weeds of the theater world, of course, you audition and you have to go through many different auditions and experience rejection. And finally, at one point, Christopher Reeve sought out this audition for Superman and he got it. And they were talking about how he told his father how he got it for Superman. Initially, his father was really excited. He thought it was more of like a theatrical piece on Broadway. And then when he found out it's based on a comic book and it's a film, he apparently was a bit disappointed in him. Like, this isn't impressive. This is a joke. And little did they know that this was going to blow up so much that there were, I believe, at least three movies, maybe four movies that he was in.
Hmm.
And the first two in particular really put him on the map.
Yeah.
And then after that, he did some drama and some other things, but nothing really landed like Superman. So it shows his life with going through like the first two films and how he found love with his first romantic relationship at that time. And it was a woman who she's still alive. It was someone that he met, I believe, like on set or off set where they were filming Superman. And this relationship was with this woman and they ended up having two kids. They were together for a number of years, but they never got married. And then I think after a while, he got so famous and he was traveling so much, it just became too much for him, where he left the relationship and left England, went back to the US. And then he eventually met his wife, Dana Reeve, who he got married to soon after. And they had a child named Will Reeve, who apparently is someone that works for ABC, Good Morning America.
Yeah,
So
he's the one that looks just like him. Like people talked about, they should have just cast him as Superman as James Gunn's because he looks so much like his dad.
yeah, he does look a lot like his
Yeah.
dad for sure. So yeah, so they go through that and just how his relationship with Dana, how they were very close. His first partner's name is Gay Exton, and that's the British woman who he met and had two kids with. He has a son and a daughter with Gay Exton, and you hear from his older children, and you could just tell the relationship is not nearly as close as it was with Will,
Mhm.
which makes sense given that he married Will's mother, Dana, and they lived, I believe, in Bedford, New York. So they were pretty much in the tri-state area. They were able to build a home and life together. And they just show his other pieces of work, but just nothing nearly as successful as what he was able to accomplish with Superman. And I think in many respects, like it's sort of like I'm going to equate it to some of the actors in Harry Potter. They were pigeonholed so, or even like Macaulay Culkin, right?
Yeah.
Like some of their earlier films were so big in a way where anything that they did after wasn't seen as significant, unfortunately. So that sort of put him I don't want to say in a crux, but definitely it was something that I think he dealt with because he did want to show more of his range and his theatrical background. But everyone just knew this guy as Superman. But he also dabbled in a lot of other things, and one of them being riding horses and the equestrian life that he learned to love. And unfortunately, in 1995 is when the accident happened where he fell off the horse and like cracked open his neck. And they showed the news story of it, and it was pretty much devastating. Number one. Number two, they didn't think he was going to live. They put him through
Yeah.
emergency surgery, and that the fact that he lived was one thing, but they pretty much told him like you're going to be paralyzed the rest of your life, and how depressing it was for him. And even just hearing him tell his story, just how much he's going to miss being with his wife physically, and because this poor man couldn't even feel anything from I think the neck down.
Yeah.
And they went through just how life-changing it was for him and their entire family. His wife Dana was now a caretaker and raising, a 5, 6 year old son at that time. His son was maybe 4, 4, 5, 6, something like that, very young. And just how incredibly challenging it was. However, Christopher Reeve was determined to not just give up on life. And they go through a lot of just what he wanted to get done as a result. He was so determined to get out of that chair. And he's not just in a wheelchair. I mean, he's tipped back, he has a
Yeah.
breathing tube. There's a lot to this process. And they show how Robin Williams was incredibly supportive during this time, and how he saw him as just his best friend regardless of what happened to him. And he didn't feel like just the two of them together. They mentioned in the relationship they rarely talked about the fact that he was paralyzed. He didn't seem as a paralyzed person. It was more just, you're my buddy and I'm here for you. And it was just, you could just tell it was such a beautiful relationship that they had and friendship, the two guys. So that was really special. And I mean, knowing what we know about Robin Williams, we know how much of a philanthropist this guy was. He even helped fund for the van that Christopher Reeve had
Oh, wow.
during this time. And when it comes to Christopher Reeve and like the medical bills and expenses, people thought that they were way more well off than they actually were. And at one point, they mentioned during the documentary that financially they could only afford for like 2 or 3 years the full amount of help. Otherwise, they were going to run out of money. And as we very well know, he lasted like 9, 10 years after the initial injury. He did start to have some movement, not much movement, but like they showed the movement of his pinky at one point, which was interesting. And it's amazing how much he got accomplished in those 9 years. He directed a film about a woman with a spinal cord injury similar to what he had, and they developed the foundation, the Christopher Reeve Foundation, where him and Dana really would spearhead and make this into an organization that helped funded research and really just make strides for people that were paralyzed. And I mean, to this day, they've gone really very far with some of this research. They showed a man like towards the end of the documentary who was able to walk, who was paralyzed, not very well, but he's walking nonetheless, and just how far they've come. And they were very focused on things like stem cell research and
Hmm.
other things as well. And when people were telling him, no, just, you need to take a seat back, he was so determined to get out of his chair. And just being someone who was so heroic and showcased being Superman on screen, this guy was not about to just, I mean, as depressing as you can imagine it being,
Yeah.
waking up one day and you're completely paralyzed, no feeling whatsoever from the neck down. I think most people would have just given up, and he didn't. And that part, I think, it just showed how special of a person he really was, and how he took this tremendous disaster that ruined his life in many respects, but it also made him who he was, and I think left a real footprint for just his contribution and what he'll always be remembered for. So I do recommend the series. It goes through his relationship with his family, Robin Williams. People that are interviewed in this documentary include Whoopi Goldberg, who he was very close with, Glenn Close, who even makes a comment at one point saying she believes that Robin Williams would still be alive today if Christopher Reeve, which was a pretty bold statement, if Christopher Reeve had not passed away before. And I think he's just definitely a symbol for the disabled in this
Hmm.
country.
Yeah, I think he left a longer legacy because of that than he did
As Superman.
because of Superman. I kind of like, as a big Superman fan, and I've seen all the iterations of Superman since then. And everybody always gets compared to him, and he did four movies, two of which were great. The third one was iffy. The fourth one was terrible. Um,
Right,
but
that's what I said.
like he's always been the guy that everybody gets compared to, and I also kind of wonder if he'd had a more like expansive career and done more things and been other people, if that comparison would be the same. But because his career was um otherwise less than stellar. He did a movie called what was it? Somewhere in Time with Jane Seymour, I think. Right around the same time as Superman 2. And that's actually a pretty decent film. And if you look at it up on IMDb, it's pretty well rated. But um, otherwise, yeah, he didn't do a whole lot. And I think part of his legacy comes out of people seeing who he was after the injury and all the things that he did, that kind of keeps him as the model of what you want somebody to be when they're playing Superman. I know after his injury, he actually acted a few more times, not much, but a little bit. Um, One of the big ones being he was in two episodes of Smallville,
Mm,
which was a really big deal. And if you ever read I don't know if they talked about it in the documentary, but if you ever read up on it, like they had to kick him off set because he was so happy to be there and he loved talking to Tom Welling and he loved doing everything. And he was only supposed to be there for a certain amount of time because of his health. Like he wasn't supposed to be there longer. And he just like he couldn't he just didn't want to go. Like he was having such a good time and talking to everybody and just so happy, um, being a part of this thing that probably wouldn't be as big of a deal if it wasn't for him in the first place. I don't remember the exact year, but this might be after the Brandon Routh Superman movie came out. Um, and like Smallville was a thing. Like Smallville was a big deal for what it was doing for the character. And so for him to show up was big for the show. But like I said, it just from all accounts of everybody on set, he was just amazing. And you would think somebody that's been through that could really easily kind of just be a jerk all the time. Like, I mean, it would just be easy to be negative all the time. And it from, everything I've ever heard, he really wasn't. Like he tried really hard to be, better for everyone around him.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then unfortunately they explained at the end of the documentary and showcased that about a year and a half, 2 years after he passed, his wife Dana Reeve passed from lung cancer. So
Hmm.
Will Reeve did not have it easy. He was pretty much an orphan in his teens.
Yeah, and I can totally see how they wouldn't have had much money. Like I said, his Christopher Reeve, he'll always be Superman. Or like everybody thinks of him like, but he didn't have a big money making career.
Right.
And so, it's not an industry that pays you monthly, right? You get paid for the chunk of work that you do, and if you don't save that the right way and make it last, um, it just doesn't. And so there's a lot of people that hit it big at one point early in their career and then fade off, and people expect them to be rich forever. But I mean, even if you get paid, $10 million for a movie, which sounds like a ton of money, and it is, for most of us, if you are under the impression you're going to be successful, you go and spend that money like a fool, and then it's gone, and then you don't get the next thing, you're done. And I'm not saying that's what he did, but I mean, he hit it big at, how old was he when he was Superman? Like 28, 29, something like that. Like he was pretty young, and yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's people expect people to be rich because they were actors, and it doesn't last unless you really plan.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bummer. But to be fair, Matt Reeve looks like he did well for himself in the long run. But definitely had some hardships early on in his life.
You mean Will Reeve?
Yeah, sorry, Will Reeve. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt's his oldest. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the peak moments of the documentary too was about a year after his injury. He comes out in the 1996 Oscars and rolls out in the wheelchair. And
Oh yeah, the place went nuts.
oh yeah, the place went nuts. They were all like clapping and applauding for him. It was impressive. And even just getting there, because they had to fly him all the way to the West
Hmm.
Coast for this, and it was very special.
Yeah. Yeah, everything about him took, so much more work because they had to be so careful. That's why, like, I think Smallville wasn't too bad. I know it's up north.
Mhm.
They filmed in Canada, but I think it was north of New York. So I don't think he had to travel as far as he would have for the Oscars to do the
Yeah,
show. But yeah, I mean, he did a handful of things. He did like three or four things after the accident. He showed up in an episode of The Practice, and then a movie. He did a remake of Rear Window, which makes sense. It's about a guy in a wheelchair that can't do anything and witnesses a crime. So, you know, probably a part that they threw together for him more than anything else. I mean, the movie already existed. Rear Window, I think, is a Hitchcock film from before, but if you're going to remake it and you're going to put a guy in a wheelchair, why not, grab the most famous guy in a wheelchair at the time. But yeah, no, you always hear about how much he advocated for the disabled or those that were paralyzed, and and all the work that he did. So yeah, it sounds like an awesome documentary. I definitely need to watch it because I'm a big fan of his and the movies. So
yeah, no,
yeah.
I recommend it. And whether you've seen his movie, and I probably just saw the first one growing up, but I mean, when you think of Christopher Reeve, you think of just paralysis and just his contribution to society when it comes to spinal cord injuries, and
Hmm.
just been able to be like, I don't want to say the poster child, but really just his accident really helped pave the way for better care and just more money towards research for those that are disabled and have had similar injuries.
And I think he was one of the first people to really fight and push for
Oh yeah.
stem cell research. He was big on that, and um, he didn't obviously have anything to do with the science itself, but he really advocated for it and pushed for it, and he was one of the bigger names behind it in its early stages.
For sure. Yeah, no, overall very good documentary. I'm glad I watched it. And yeah, it's on HBO Max. Pretty easy to stream if you have that service, and give it a whirl overall in terms of just ratings and how the actual documentary did according to Rotten Tomatoes. Go back to that.
Yeah, I think it did pretty well from what I remember seeing.
Superman, Christopher Reeve documentary, 98 Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, which is good. I'm not surprised by it. It was an easy watch too. I was able to say actually, yeah, 98 from both the critics and audience. That's something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big deal. So, all right, well, cool. We'll keep rolling along here, but yeah, definitely if you got HBO, check it out. Awesome, awesome dude, cool story, good learning experience, I think. Um, but I'll move us forward. I watched a pair of Christmas or Christmas adjacent movies um, today. Actually, I watched both of them. But the first one to talk about is Red One, which is behind me here. This stars Chris Evans and The Rock and J.K. Simmons as Santa Claus, which is great because J.K. Simmons does not play a fat Santa. He plays a super jacked Santa. There's a couple of scenes where he's working out and stuff. And I mean, he got fit for something a couple years back, and he's just been kind of ripped ever since. But he's a lot of fun. The Rock is The Rock. Like he plays the same person he always plays, which in this movie works. And then Chris Evans is he kind of leans more towards his character from Knives Out. Like he's a little more of a screw up. Not the best guy. But yeah, this one I'll just start off with it. The tomato meter, the critics rating is 30%. Like this movie was hated by the critics. It bombed at the box office. Everyone that I talked to before I watched it today really enjoyed it. And the audience score is 90%. It's one of the might be the widest margin I've ever seen between critics and audience. I mean, 60 is a huge gap. And I haven't read the articles. I don't know what the critics hated so much about it. I think if you watch the trailer, it is exactly as advertised. It is a Christmas action comedy. And I think, historically those haven't done well. There's like Jingle All the Way from a million years ago that wasn't great. That one was Schwarzenegger. And then I think the kid actor wasn't very good. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but um, I don't know what critics are expecting from a Christmas movie because, like, to be real, like this hit all of the notes that you're supposed to hit in a Christmas movie and in an action movie. So I'm not saying it was great. Like, I don't know that I would give it, a 90. Um, but it was fun. And it was well made. Like it had a $250 million budget, and I think it made like 80 million. I mean, it lost a boatload of money. And I'm sure a good chunk of that money went to the cast with Lucy Liu was in it also. Kiernan Shipka was in it, and she was actually pretty great. So it had a really solid cast. But yeah, it opens up really quick. It's got a little short thing to kind of set you up for Chris Evans' character, where he's a little kid who basically takes his cousins up to the attic and shows them all their Christmas presents before Christmas, pointing out, Santa's not real. Like, and so there's this whole thing, like he's kind of a little dick. And then it jumps to today, and he's a tracker. He's somebody that like finds stuff out about people, but he's really shady. And so somebody's paying him to break into this seismic institute and basically tap their wires. And the whole opening scene is hilarious because he's got this plan to do this thing, and it's a well thought out plan. Like he's not stupid. He's not an idiot. He's a bit of a mastermind, but he's just not the best guy. And later on, we find out he's like on the naughty list level 4, which is like as bad as it gets, right? Um, but he taps into this line and then watches for seismic activity so he can get paid. And what we come to find out is that when this alarm is triggered, it's when Santa Claus flies back home and he breaks, whatever barrier of magic that Santa breaks before he lands at the North Pole, which is hidden behind this very like Black Panther Wakanda like dome. Like you can't see through, you can't tell that it's there. It kind of masks the North Pole, which is now when he first lands, you find out that the North Pole is like a bustling metropolis. Like it's a big city now with all the workers and everything. And there's like this cute moment where you see they've kind of cordoned off the original like Santa's workshop, and it's this little workshop in the middle of town that's closed off. But then now it's a big bustling to do, and so when they trigger this alarm, this group of bad people show up and they break in and they kidnap Santa Claus. And a little earlier than that, actually, Santa goes to a mall to do, Santa mall work just to, kind of meet the people. And The Rock is with him, and The Rock is basically his number one, like, not enforcer is the wrong word, but basically like security for Santa Claus, right? Like, he rushes off this like influencer who jumps up and tries to do something stupid and all that. And so they leave there. That's when they on their way home. That's when they trigger this thing, and these guys show up and kidnap Santa Claus. So now the Rock's character Callum has to um, go and find out, excuse me, about how to get him back and who took him and all that. And to find Santa, they have to find the best tracker they can find, and it happens to be, of course, for reasons of plot, Chris Evans' character. And so once they find him, they have 24 hours until Christmas Eve. So they obviously have to get Santa back within 24 hours. And so the thing about Chris Evans' character is he has a son that he had with this girl when he was very young, and he's kind of around for the kid's life, like he'll pick him up or whatever, but they don't have a relationship. Like his mother has remarried. That guy is a really good father to the kid, and so Chris Evans's character is like, yeah, I don't need to, um, I don't need to be a part of his life. He's got a good enough dad already, right? And so he kind of stays out of that portion of the kid's life, which, when you're watching it, you can see that, um, that's kind of going to be the through line, right? Like at some point, he's going to have to make up with his son. Like it's a Christmas movie. You want to see everybody make up at the end, right? The other thing was that in that stay at the mall with Santa, the Rock's character, Callum realizes that the kids are all good. Like still kids at the mall are still inherently good, but all of the adults suck. And so he tells Santa, he's like, this is my last year. He's like, I can't be a good support system for you when I see so much out there that disappoints me. And so he says he's going to step down. So you can see that like that's the other through line through the movie is that at the end of the movie, he's going to see the light in people and want to stay, right? Because that's the kind of movie this is for sure. And so when Santa wakes up in his cell, he's been kidnapped by this woman. I think her name was Gorilla, and she's a Christmas witch, and she wants to ruin Christmas and all this stuff. And she's played by Kiernan Shipka, who was almost unrecognizable, and in a good way. Like she looked good. She just she's young and still on the rise, and she was really great in it. And so the rest of the movie is just them trying to get to Santa, and along the way when they pick up Jack is Chris Evans' character, they end up picking up or having to save his son because this character Grilla and all her goons realize that he's after her, so they have to kind of try and get leverage on him, and they attempt and they ultimately both get kind of locked up. So they have a moment together, him and his son, where they kind of talk things through and realize that he really could be doing a better job, and he doesn't have to stay away just because this kid has another great dad. And so like the whole movie goes down, and like I said, it's exactly what it is in the trailer. There's all kinds of things they like little trials they have to go through to get to Santa. Like at one point, they're trying to figure out or get some more information, so they have to go meet Santa's brother Krampus, who if you there's a horror movie called Krampus, but Krampus is also old. German or Nordic mythology, which is kind of the reverse of Santa. Like if you're a bad kid, he's going to come take you in the night. Like it's sort of a scary thing. Um, but in this, he's just, he's a monster and they have a little face off, but he's not, not that bad. Like the whole thing about this movie is it's super kid friendly. I think it has to be PG. I doubt it's even PG-13. I know it is PG-13, but um, there's a few profanities in there. They almost drop an F-bomb. But it it works. Like it really is just it's a lot of fun and like I said, at the end of the day, everything that's supposed to happen in a Christmas movie does happen. Like Santa makes his deliveries. Dude makes up with his kid, and they're gonna have a better life. The Rock sees the good in people and decides he wants to stay on. And yeah, it just really it ends where it's supposed to, and it's just a lot of fun along the way, as long as you're not looking for like Miracle on 34th Street. Like I
I
don't
think
know what critics were looking
based on
for.
reading the critic
Uh-huh.
review, I think that's kind of what they feel. It doesn't have that traditional Christmas charm like some of those movies like The Santa Claus, for example,
Yeah.
with Allen. It's not to that degree. And I think that's part of the issue. You need to learn to adapt and come up or have new expectations because you can't always have that same type of movie and that same
Yeah.
plot.
And
You have to mix things up with as time goes on.
and I love the Santa Claus. Like I will watch it every single year if it's on. Like I actually really, really enjoy that movie.
Sure.
But it's a different movie. Like
Right.
this is an action. Like I never understand how critics review something without understanding what they're going in to see. If it's literally an action comedy, you have to know there's certain things that are going to be there, and you have to judge that movie based on the genre that it's in.
Right.
It's just not quite the same as something like the Santa Claus. Like it just doesn't work the same. This isn't about one single guy and all that. This is wild and crazy. Like this kind of leans into almost like a kid's version of Die Hard and the craziness, like all this stuff. Like it's totally fine. It's definitely family friendly as long as you don't mind a little bit of profanity. Otherwise, nothing really
Right.
bad or graphic happens in it. But I can see that. So I always have to remember a 90% from the audience score doesn't mean everybody gave it a nine. It means
Right.
90% of the people that saw it liked it. So if they
Right.
were given the choice between you like it or you don't, and they said they do. So like I get how 90% of people went to see this and enjoyed it because those people that wanted to watch this
Mhm.
knew what they were going to see. So like from our friend group, Pete saw it, Andy saw it, Jen saw it, all three of them liked it. I saw it. I liked it. My son saw it. He liked it. It's it's a fun movie. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna be a movie people are talking about in 5 years. Like it's not gonna be like Elf or Santa Claus or any of these other like classic movies. But it's
Mhm.
a fun movie. I can see how it didn't make its money back at the box office.
Yeah.
It's another one that I don't really remember really great advertising for.
I
Um,
actually thought it was pretty well
was
advertised.
it?
I think so. Like at least I can only speak to what I see here in New York City. You
Hmm.
do see the advertising for it, and I just remember seeing previews at least at the end of the summer, early fall for this. I will say that I mean, you did mention this isn't something that you would necessarily see again, or wasn't the most memorable film. That's a lot of what the critics said too. It doesn't give them that sense of it's easily forgettable, basically.
Yeah, another problem that it had is it's probably a little too long. It's like 2 hours long, and I think they probably could have trimmed the fat a little bit, which would make it more rewatchable.
Mhm.
Um, if one of my because I only watched it with one of my sons. If my other two wanted to watch it, I would totally watch it again. If my wife wanted to watch it, I'd watch it again. Like, there's no reason I wouldn't watch it again.
Right.
Um, but next year there's going to be a new batch of movies, and I don't know that I'll remember to go back to this one. I I wouldn't be averse to it. Like I wouldn't not watch it for any reason. Um, but yeah, non memorable is probably a good way to put it. Like I probably won't
Right.
remember to go watch it. For me, there you got Elf, you've got Home Alone, you have the Santa Claus, you have these movies that are kind of the tried and true classics. But you also have to just, leave the door open for a movie that's fun for 1 year. I mean, that's totally fine. It probably shouldn't have been a $250 million movie, if it's only going to be good for 1 year. But,
You went and
it's,
saw it, and it was, your holiday movie of 2024.
yeah, if you did that, I don't think, and to be fair, like the people that I know that have watched it weren't disappointed. And I forgot to say it's on Amazon Prime now for free. So for
Okay.
anybody that does want to watch it between now and Christmas, you don't have to pay for it anymore. You can go watch it, and see for yourself. And like I said, my only recommendation is go in eyes open. It's an action comedy, and it's going to be exactly that. Um, I feel like Lucy Liu was in there, and she was a little underutilized because I adore her.
Sure.
But she wasn't bad. She's great. J.K. Simmons, while playing Santa in a Christmas movie, wasn't overly used. Like he's in it for a fair amount. But this is really about um, you know, The Rock's character and Chris Evans' character and the things that they have to go through to, get to where they're going to their little hero's journey, as they call it, like they've got to get from point A to point B. And for me, they did that. So it was what it was supposed to be for a Christmas movie. So
Who's the voice of the polar bear? Or is there a voice or no?
there is a polar bear. The polar
I'm
bear, for some reason or another, is named Garcia. I actually really liked the polar bear. He was awesome. Let me see if I can see who played him. Garcia, Garcia,
Yeah, they keep
Garcia.
on mentioning. I'm just going through like some of the critic reviews. It's not a, it doesn't, it lacks holiday spirit. It's more secular. I mean, most Christmas movies today are secular.
Oh, for
Hello.
sure.
I
Yeah,
just find that comment to be like so generic, and it's kind of meaningless because look at the world we live in today.
yeah,
What's the spirit? I mean, did you think from the previews that this was going to be the film that had give you the holiday spirit that you needed? I don't know, but I think you're right. If you're looking for just something funny that has a Christmas theme, that has actors that are good to watch in action, this is probably a good choice.
yeah, yeah. It's just fun, and it does kind of lean towards more of that, um, male kid energy, right? Because it's an
Sure.
action movie, right? So I'm not saying like girls wouldn't like it, especially if they,
Mhm.
um, got if they really got into the gorilla character, even though she's the villain. I thought Kiernan Shipka did a great job as her.
Sure.
Um, she definitely like kind of embodied the part, like gave herself to it, and she did a really good job. Um, but it had a ton of people in it, and they nobody missed. That's the thing too. Like nobody really missed. It was The Rock knowing that this is a part that he needed to play a certain way that he is actually good at. Like those are the roles that he's good at.
Right.
Um, it gave Chris Evans a chance to have a little range, that not Captain America range, which is always good for him, I think. And then, J.K. Simmons, he's so good because he can play a total dick. Like he can play so like evil and mean and just nasty, or he can be like heartfelt and hilarious. Like he is exactly what you want from kind of like a modern day Santa that you're kind of poking fun at the idea of. And
Right.
I think, that was okay. Bonnie Hunt played his wife, who's a hilarious like comedian, but she doesn't get enough screen time or doesn't really get to do anything funny. It's like she was in there, for those of us that are older that remember her
Right.
earlier career, but she doesn't really get the opportunity to bring anything to the table. Um, but yeah, it's just fun. Like yeah, I would say I mean, you've got what, 10 days till Christmas now, I think. By the time this airs, you'll have less than that. But if you got a couple hours with the family and you want to watch it, it's worth it. It's fun.
Yeah.
So.
definitely.
So, all right, we'll move on to something that, from what I saw, looked less fun in A Real Pain with Jesse Eisenberg.
It's real pain. This came out in theaters last month. It was, yeah, November 1st. So it's been out for a little over a month. Directed by Jesse Eisenberg. He also plays the main character, David, and Kieran Culkin plays his cousin, Benji. The two of them go on a trip as adults to Poland. They play two cousins that were apparently born like 3 weeks apart, and they go to Poland to honor their grandmother, who was someone who grew up in Poland during the Holocaust. And they take this tour with some other strangers in a group, and it starts off in Warsaw, and Will Sharp plays the tour guide, James, who takes them through, who I enjoyed watching in season 2 of White Lotus. And they meet some people along the way. In the actual tour, they have Jennifer Grey, who plays a recently single woman, divorced from, I believe, New York, or at least somewhere in the US. And then they have this guy in the group who is originally from Rwanda, who converts to Judaism. And then they have this couple who joins them. So altogether, there are 6 of them in the group. And then Will Sharp is the British tour guide who takes them through. And during this time, you learn a lot about these two cousins and their relationship. Jesse Eisenberg got married. He lives in New York City, has a big time job, and has a child. And then Kieran Culkin lives in upstate New York. They reference the Binghamton area. And he is someone who is pretty broken. And you find out within the past year had tried to commit suicide via overdosing, and his mother found him. And this trip is, in many ways, Jesse Eisenberg's character, David, I think, wants to bond with his cousin who he grew up very close with. And also, Benji, Kieran Culkin's character, was incredibly close with his grandmother, and she passed within that year. And I think her death, coupled with his own mental health issues, resulted in him trying to take his own life. So they thought, all right, this is a good time to take a trip, be able to give you perspective and hopefully clear your mind and give you some, like a new slate, really, towards life, and just starting fresh. And at that point, David has been working so much, he hasn't really been away from his wife and his child. So this is just like a good story about two boys who are, well, they're men, who were once very close, and just them rebuilding their relationship as cousins along the way, while they're learning about the Holocaust and some of what happened in Poland during this time. And then eventually going through the tour and seeing what the ghettos look like, what a concentration camp looked like, and learning with their other group mates what entailed during this time. As they finish and get, through the tour, you really get to learn more about these characters, and how David is very by the book, and he's, truly a businessman, through and through. And he's someone that doesn't really take risks that much, whereas Benji doesn't care about anything. He is a free spirit. He's incredibly unhinged and doesn't care about anything, and gets very irritated throughout the tour several times. He also goes there to want to feel. And I think David, his cousin, Jesse Eisenberg's character, doesn't really know how to feel, or has completely buried that emotional side of him. And you find that out during the film. Like, I haven't really cried in a very long time. And whereas Benji's like, why? You need to cry. You need to let your emotions out. And then giving him permission to feel that he can feel his feelings, yet again, not just because, okay, you're an adult, therefore you're no longer to feel how you feel, but also we're in a very emotional place where our grandmother, in many respects, was able to escape death. And also just unpacking a lot of what happened over the past couple of years, how they have become more distant from one another due to just growing apart, and how Benji misses him, and David really has not I don't want to say kept in touch, but yeah, I think that he hasn't really been around as much as he would have liked to support Benji during his time with his, his decline when it comes to his mental health, and both actors really pour their soul in this film. And it's a really beautiful piece where you get to learn about two family members that try to rebuild and relearn one another, and be able to grow over time. So I liked it a lot. I thought it was great. It's a short film, about an hour 30, an hour 40. Very comical too. His character, Kieran Culkin, is hysterical, just so random and hysterical, and he takes a lot of the seriousness out of this film, but in a way where it just, puts a smile on your face. And Jesse Eisenberg definitely loosens up over time, as you come to find, as serious as something like the Holocaust is, they're able to really celebrate their grandmother's life together, and then reconnect as cousins, and rebuild their friendship and their relationship from there. So I do recommend it. Overall, very, very good film. It received some pretty good reviews overall, I would say. From Rotten Tomatoes, I'm going to go back, and 95% from the critics, and from the audience, it looks like it got an 81%. I actually am much closer to the critics on this than the audience.
Yeah, and you said he directed this, Jesse Eisenberg.
Mhm.
Was this his first directorial project?
I don't know.
He also wrote it, which
Yeah, he
is
definitely wrote
cool.
it. Hmm.
It looks like he also directed Becoming a Werewolf in 2005. So I don't know what that is, but that was obviously the beginning of his career. And then something in 2022 called When You Finish Saving the World.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but this one rates out seemingly a lot higher than that other one.
Oh yeah.
But that's cool. Like to see him, he's kind of on his own rise. He like I said, he wrote this also, which is always impressive. If you can write and direct your own thing, then that's pretty great. Um, so yeah, yeah, I think that's promising. I think people, uh, I don't know that Kieran Culkin would be a big deal if it wasn't for Succession. Like I think that really broke him out. But I'm glad it did. Like from everything I've seen from him, he's got a lot of talent.
Oh,
Um, and it's nice to see him not have to be slept on anymore. For him to be pulled into some roles that potentially are award-winning roles, or at least award-nominated roles, which is pretty great. Um, and this sounds like a good, emotional film. But I like too that the idea that it brings in some humor to it too, because if you're
oh yeah.
I don't love watching dark stories that are just dark, or sad the whole time. Unless
Mhm.
it's like perfectly done. You can do something like that, like a Schindler's List or something is not an uplifting movie, sort of is, but like, it's also really, really heavy
Right.
and you don't
That's
necessarily get
also
humor.
based on a true story, whereas this is
Hmm.
just they're throwing in historical events and how their family
Yeah,
is
yeah.
connected, but this fictional story about family and just unfortunately mental health getting thrown in there, and just how reconnecting with family members and the power it can have when you go, how about just like even just how going away on a trip can either break or make a relationship.
Hmm.
This does explore that, and how there's some very difficult moments and some moments where you can realize, like, all right, this makes sense why they haven't talked in a while, why David feels very uncomfortable around Benji. However, they realize that they love each other and that there's a reason why they should continue being in each other's lives and that they really need one another, and how where one has strengths, the other has weakness, and how they complement each other in many ways, the two
Yeah.
boys.
I think too, like that's advice that one of the things that pieces of advice that I'll give to anybody like in a relationship that like is moving along, whether it's personal, romantic, or whatever, uh, travel together and live together before you get married. Like those two things are a big deal because travel together, you learn how you adapt because travel is never just we went to this place and everything went perfectly
Right.
smooth. There's a dozen things that can go wrong in any given day. And so you can see how the person you're, with, yeah, adapts to those changes and how they, do what it is they do. And then the other one, obviously living together because uh, all those things that are a little annoying but kind of cute or whatever all of a sudden aren't cute anymore. Now you're like you don't wash your spoons the right way before you put them in the dishwasher. I hate you. Like living together changes everything. So but yeah, this it's a good point though, like them traveling together. um it starts off as a great idea in the beginning. I'm sure they're getting along just fine, and then as they start to see the things in each other that bother them, um,
Yeah.
that's when things are going to go sideways for a while.
Yeah. It's, I mean, they're two completely different guys. One's a family man and married. The other one is fortunately like pretty broken, living in his mom's basement. I mean, figure they're in their like at least their mid late 30s. It's hard, and just how they've grown apart because they're so different and at different stages of life too.
Mm. Which one's married? Eisenberg's character is married?
Yeah, David, and then Kieran Culkin play. Apparently, he plays very similar to like his character on Succession, who's kind of like
Mm.
a a bit.
Yeah.
Very funny, but yeah, I think he just calls things out as he sees them, and he wears his heart on his sleeve, whereas David's more subdued and cares too much about things and is more just by the book. And he even mentions like at one point they feel very uncomfortable, and Kieran Culkin's character Benji just has to excuse himself and is completely like unhinged at a group dinner when they're out on this tour. So he says, I have to pee. And while he goes to the bathroom, everyone's like, are you sorry you have to deal with him? And he's like, I'm sorry that you guys have to see him like this. And they're pretty much delving into detail like how broken he is and such. And then Jesse Eisenberg's character, David says, and despite everything, I kind of envy him because he doesn't give a shit about anything. And he just says what's on his mind. And, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And how even when people look like they have it so good, it's not always the case. Like nothing is picture perfect. Everyone's got their issues. And even though those who may seem on the surface to be more troubled, you'd be surprised how troubled people are, and how sometimes individuals will keep all of that weight on the inside so that others don't see. And how sometimes comparison can be the true evil at the end of the day. And I think Benji realizes he's like, my cousin's all put together. He's perfect. And he's like in PJ pants half the time, and just not, he's so I don't want to say like disheveled, but compared to his cousin David, I mean, if you look in like some pictures or the previews, he's just kind of a hippie and like wearing tie-dye and the shorts and just kind of a mess, Benji. And then you see his cousin David, who's more put together. It makes sense, but yeah, I think it was a beautiful film about two guys that are traveling together and their family. So they're getting back in touch after a number of years of being, I don't want to say in no contact, but contact has definitely severed a bit.
Mm.
So, and I think pain is just a theme in general. Like he is a pain in the ass, Kieran Culkin's character, a real pain in the ass. Like when you would expect a trip to be as well, I don't want to say jovial because it's not. They're learning about the Holocaust. It's a very emotional and dark theme, but something as informative and knowledgeable and something that you would think would go smoothly with the tour guide. Nope. Everything has to be, he's very sarcastic, Benji, and has to question everything and questions the tour guide and just how people are feeling. And he's just one to call out how he's feeling at any point in time. And yeah, I think we all know someone like that
Yeah.
in our life where it's never just smooth sailing. Like there has to be those bumps, right? And I think that's just how Benji is. He's not very even keeled. Whereas David just maybe things frustrate him, but he keeps it inside. He doesn't say anything and he just lets it go. So it definitely makes for an interesting trip for sure. And it's one of those where it's like, I don't know if I'd want this person on my trip. Very uncomfortable and has always has something to say, is a bit condescending, but also is keeps it real, which is something that a lot of people, myself included, appreciate. So yeah, definitely see it. It's heartwarming, wholesome in its own way, very funny too, and it explores personality types and how family can come back together by, in this case, exploring their loved one's past and someone that they both loved very much.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds really good. Like I actually want to watch it. It
Yeah.
sounds like a solid flick. And I like both of these guys and I think they might I know they've both been award nominated for various roles and stuff, but I still feel like they're kind of slept on. Like people don't talk about them all the time and they're both really talented. So
Yeah, and they do have a good chemistry on film in this movie for sure as two cousins. And that's really great that he wrote it. I didn't realize he wrote it too. Jesse Einsberg just thought he directed it, but that's something else.
yeah, cool. All right. Well, then I am going to take us out with a movie that takes place at Christmas time and isn't necessarily a Christmas movie. It's gonna, it's the same argument that you make with Die Hard. Um, this is less of an action movie and more of a thriller. It's called Carry On Netflix, starring Taron Egerton and just Jason Bateman and a couple other like smaller actors that have been around, but that you probably don't know by name. Theo Rossi's the one that I can think of. He was on Sons of Anarchy. He was in The Penguin. He plays the therapist in The Penguin, but he's not really a huge deal. And then Sophia Carson, who was a Disney kid. Um, she's grown up ish. She must be 30, I think. I think I saw she was born in 93, so that would make her 30 now. So um, she plays the girlfriend of Taron Egerton, or maybe it's his wife. I don't remember if they said girlfriend or wife. But anyways, the gist of this movie is number one, this is another movie where you have to go in with expectations. Funny enough, the critics actually rated this one well, 86 from the critics, but 59% from the audience. Um, and I don't know that I disagree with the audience. It's a little harsh from the audience. I mean, on IMDb, it's a 6.6, and if somebody asked me to rate it, yeah, I'd probably give it a 6 or a 7 or right in there. So I think that works. Um, but the idea is that it opens up and we see Taron Egerton and his lady love. I'll just say wife, whether I'm right or wrong. And they're talking about how she's pregnant, like she just got pregnant. They're talking about, when's she going to get the baby bump, and she's excited for it. Like they're happy to have a kid, and they talk really briefly about how he should have applied for the police academy a second time. Like I guess he applied once and got declined. Um, and so he's working as a TSA agent right now at the airport because he can't get into the police academy. I think they said LAPD, but I'm not sure. Um, and so he goes to work. She also works at the airport. She works as a manager of some kind there. And as his day goes on, somebody bumps into him and slips him a little earpiece that he puts in his ear. And immediately the ultimatum is given. He's like, if you don't want your wife to die, you have to let just one package through the gate, through your security checkpoint. And so most of the tension in this movie is dialogue through Jason Bateman's character. Jason Bateman plays the bad guy, the villain in this one. I forget the character's name, but it doesn't really matter. Like the names are almost interchangeable here, but he he's basically telling him, he's like, look, we'll kill your wife if you don't just let this one bag through. And he's like, well, what's in the bag? He's like, I'm not going to tell you that. He's like, you just have to let it through. That's all you have to do. Everything will be fine. And so this is, very much like a speed movie, right? Where, if the bus goes below 50 miles an hour, you're all going to die. And so, he tries to get a little crafty at first, and then they come to realize that Theo Rossi's character's out there in a van, and for whatever bit of technical magic that he has, he's tapped into all of the video feeds at the airport, so he can see everything Taron Egerton's doing. So he tries to sneakily text somebody, and they're like, "Hey, we can see that you have your phone. Why don't you put that down? We see you're making a phone call. Try, put that down." All this stuff, and so he gets a little tense, and then he kind of thinks, well, maybe I should just, you know, stand up against this and try and do something. And he goes to, make whatever action it was he was thinking of doing. And you see Jason Bateman's character walk by and it effectively poisons somebody that he knows. And the guy has a heart attack, like right there, like right in front of him. And he's like, I told you to just do what you're supposed to do or people are going to die. Um, and, and so I mean, that's the general, like, I want to give a more of a review, but I mean, that's the general gist of the movie, right? It's this whole cat and mouse back and forth of um, trying to do the right thing, which is not let this thing through because whatever it um, is not going to be good, right? Like he doesn't know. But when he finally scans it, it goes through this thing that, I don't work for the TSA and I don't know how their equipment works, but it looked like it was working a little better than it probably actually does. Like it was identifying all these components of this bomb or not bomb, but like something that would release a nerve agent, is what they're saying it is. And so, um, he's got to make the choice. He's like, well, now it's me and my wife against potentially an entire plane full of people, whatever. So you have that kind of moral conundrum, but of course, his wife is pregnant. So of course he's going to choose, his wife and baby. And so he's got to, battle his way out of that, um, and figure out how to save the day. And I'll be a little spoilery here just because it kind of explains the movie and kind of the way everything goes. Like when they threaten his wife again, like he thinks he's going to get her out of there. He thinks he's got a clear route to get her out of there at one point, and he goes and grabs her, and she's like, "Where are we going?" And he looks up, and there's a red dot on her forehead. So somebody has got a sniper on her. And he puts the thing back in his ear, and the dude's like, "Hey, you need to walk away right now. Can't say another word." if you say another word, she's dead. And so he just like walks away from his wife, and she's like, "What the fuck is going on?" Like she's like, you know, she's starting to get frustrated with him because she can see kind of his behavior and um, the way he's, not himself in the situation, and she's worried that it's about their talk about the police academy or that it's about the baby and all this stuff, and he can't tell her what it's about. And so, uh, as the story goes on again, uh, for whatever reason, later on in the story, he's finally able to kind of break this cycle that's going on. At one point, he pisses off Jason Bateman's character, who I have to say does a great job as a villain. Like he's so calm, but so like not um like there's no like human emotion to him. He's like, you're gonna do this thing, or the people that you love are gonna die. He's like, you can make the choice. We'll find somebody else to get it done, and then we'll just move on. Because that was the other thing in the beginning. It wasn't even supposed to be him working that gate that day. He was supposed to be somewhere else. But because of the conversation with his wife, he felt like he needed to go to his boss and say, "Hey, I deserve to be doing more work." So they put him in this position where he, was going to be working the gate instead of doing whatever, his job was before that. And and so he inadvertently put himself in this position instead of somebody else that they were ready to kind of um, force into this. Like it opens up showing Jason Bateman's people at this guy's house where his wife and kids are. They're about to take them when they realize that they have the now they have the wrong person at the gate. Um, but at some point, things go sideways, and everybody, bad guy and him, have to adapt. And so to get his character in line, to get Taron Egerton's character Ethan in line, Jason Bateman's character triggers the device. He's like, you have 10 minutes. You can disable the device, or everybody in the airport's going to die. That includes you and your wife. So, do this thing. And so he goes in. He ends up in a very questionable situation where he's got to deal with his boss, who he likes. And Jason Bateman's character is like, cool, you want to disarm the bomb? You got to shoot him in the head. He's like, you got to do it, or it's not going to happen. And he stalls and stalls and stalls, and somebody else ultimately kills him. So he doesn't have to, but it's like he's in this position that's just, it's like an impossible situation, right? You have to choose between people. But he ultimately, the Jason Bateman's character, who I don't think they ever give a name to, teaches him how to disable the bomb because, that's the only way to do it. You can't do it from the phone. Once it's triggered, it's going to go off unless somebody does X, Y, and Z. And so he does that. And so that comes into play later in the in the show. At the end of the movie, this guy's got to be the hero where somehow he's running from the feds, he's running from the other TSA agents, he's running from the cops, manages to get on the plane that Jason Bateman's character is on, disarm the bomb and do all this crazy stuff to, be the hero at the end. And then, you have the completely unrealistic bit of how he goes through all this stuff. Like he's responsible for the death of, because of the way things went, at least like two or three other people. Like two or three other people died because he didn't just report it right away, which may not have worked. The guy may have let a thing off and killed everybody at the airport. Who knows? But, uh, he played along with this criminal activity. Well, of course, at the end of the movie, somebody from the LAPD is like, "You were pretty darn smart," blah blah blah. And so at the end, he's an LAPD cop, and I'm like, he was literally like blackmailed into doing the wrong thing. It's exactly what you don't want somebody to be doing as a cop, and they let him in. So I mean, it's definitely like the whole movie overall. There's a sense of um, action cheesiness that you have to accept for the movie to work. Like there's just a series of bad decisions, a lot of things that aren't necessarily hyper realistic, right? It's like I said, if you compare it to Speed or you compare it to Die Hard, like these aren't things that would actually happen. So if you accept that, then you can accept the kind of the wackiness of it, and just enjoy it for what it was. I don't think it was a bad movie. I think it's a solid action movie. The reason that it kind of questionably falls into that Christmas movie status is it takes place on Christmas Eve at the airport because, of course, the airport has to be as busy as it can be, to make it, more tense and all that. Um, but like realistically, they play Christmas music at the beginning, Christmas music at the end, and then other than talking about how it's Christmas Eve and it's so busy, nothing is about Christmas at all. Um, but yeah, this one's on Netflix. Um, like I said, I don't know that I recommend it to everybody. Like I would recommend Red One more than I would recommend this. Um, it's not a bad film. Like it's just fine. If you like Die Hard and you like Speed and you like that genre of movies very specifically, like it is very much one of those movies. If you like those, then you'll like this. Like everybody's solid in it. Taron Egerton's good. Jason Bateman is arguably really good. Um, everybody else is just fine. Like they do their parts really well and do what they're supposed to do. Um, but it's not going to blow anybody's mind. Like this is not the auteurs action movie. If you want that, there's the Jackal on Peacock or the Agency on Paramount Plus right now. Those shows are a little more like cerebral in what they've got. This is straightforward drama thriller, you know, do what you've got to do to survive kind of movie. Um, so like I said, if that's your jam, awesome. If it's not, then you probably won't like it. And it's funny to me that it seems like the critics understood what this movie was going in and they gave it an 86%, but they didn't understand what Red One was when they went in and gave it a 30%. Like it's confusing to me sometimes, but I actually do think Red One is the better movie. There's nothing wrong with this one as long as it's what you want to see, you know. So that's that's it. That's all I've got. I don't know. Do you have anything else?
Oh,
Yeah. All right. Then we probably won't have an episode next week. Um, for once, it's totally my fault. My daughter's in town and she is cooler than everybody I know, so I will be hanging out with her. Plus, on another note, she gets to sleep in the room where I do my recording, so I won't be able to record at night. So if something comes out, between now and Christmas and it really strikes my fancy, I might sneak in a way to record a quick episode just about something, but otherwise I wouldn't look for an episode next week. But lots of stuff coming. The movie that I was talking about in the pre-show that I'm excited for is Juror Number Two is going to be streaming. That's like Clint Eastwood's most recent movie that he directed. It stars. I'm trying to find out here. What's his name? Nicholas Holt and Tony Collette and J.K. Simmons, Chris Messina. And it's a courtroom drama, but it's Clint Eastwood directs a movie. He directs pretty solid drama, so I'm really curious about it. And I think it starts streaming on the 20th. And then, like you said, Squid Game comes back right after Christmas. So by the time we record again, I'll have watched at least some of it, if not all of it. So that one's coming. I feel like there's something else coming in this next week. So there'll be a couple of things at least to discuss by the time we do come back and record. So since we're not recording next week, not only will I say thank you to everybody for watching or listening, but have a happy holiday, whichever holiday it is that you participate in, and I hope they're great. We may have an episode before New Year's, we may not. So if we don't, have a happy New Year, and we will catch you next time.